Hi students, let's talk about visual versus verbal communication and how visual aids enhance your presentations if they are used properly. So let's move forward. As we know, we all tend to think visually. We learn better visually. When there's a visual component, even something simple, I think of learning people's names. I'm terrible at learning people's names. If you meet me out and you shake my hand and I say, hi, my name's Mary. Hi, my name is Melissa. I'm not even listening when it comes down to what your name is. It's awful for me. I can try really hard. I can try to use the name again in a sentence, but I can tell you this. If somebody is wearing a name tag and they say, hi, my name is Melissa, I look at them, I look at their name tag, and then for the rest of the night, I can remember their name. I can visualize that name tag when I look at them and I know that it says Melissa. So recognize the power of the visual component to learning. So using visual communication will enhance and drive home your messages. So you have to be able to do it well. So if you have a well-crafted visual aid that is not a distraction, that is not overly wordy, that is not, we'll go through all the components, it really does add value. Now, we have to recognize that you need to know to use visual aids with caution because they're not just willy-nilly things that you do. I once had a student that needed a visual component to their speech. They were talking about the most winning college football program in the nation, and they were talking about Ohio State or some component of Ohio State, and they wrote on a loose leaf piece of paper that they tore out of their notebook with its jagged edges, like "Go Buckeyes," and then they taped it onto the front of the lectern, and they wrote it in like black marker, and it was just absurd. You looked at it and you thought, how ill prepared is this person? Why did they tape that on? Now, the student didn't want to lose points for not having a visual aid, but really they lost points because their visual aid was a distraction. It made them look like they weren't prepared. It made them look like they didn't care. It made them look very unprofessional. So these visual aids can add such tremendous value. They can clarify your points. They can lead your audience through your presentation. They can even be lecture notes. When they're done poorly, they are really a distraction. I've also had students that have used videos and things of that sort, and the videos don't play, and they say, oh, well, I'm just not going to talk about that. And then they miss a whole portion of their presentation because their visual aid didn't work. So if you're using a visual aid, you have to practice, 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 and know how to use your visual aid, know how to turn to the next slide while you are speaking. So visual aids are great, but you have to practice with them. So now let's talk about a few things that you need to think about when crafting your visual aid. You want to make sure that your visual aid is clear, not cluttered. So typeface and fonts. If you've ever seen a visual aid where you can't read it, the font is too small, it's written in some cursive font that you have no idea what it says. That is a distraction. That does not add value to your presentation. So make sure you're using a font that is clear on a background that is appropriate. I want to say less is more. All those fun graphics you can do where things fade away or slither into place, those again are a distraction. Your visual component is really supposed to just add to your speech. It is not your presentation. You are your presentation. You are your best visual aid. Look your audience in the eye, talk to them. Make sure that you use your vocal intonation and you use your words to paint a clear picture, but then you add that extra oomph, that added value with the visual component. So make sure your fonts are clear. Don't clutter your slides or your pages. I've seen faculty members and professors put up whole outlines and then just read blah, blah, blah from the outline. I mean, wah, 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 wah. Isn't that just what Charlie Brown experienced in school? We don't want that. We don't want you reading from your outline. We don't want you just post that whole outline up on a PowerPoint and then read it to us. We can read faster than you can read to us. We'll get more out of it if you just hand us a piece of paper. So that is not a visual aid. A visual aid is making, taking out maybe your main points, using some pictures to elaborate, using some videos to elaborate. When using visual aids for demonstrative speeches, I am all for taking pictures along the way. So preheat the oven. Take a picture of preheating the oven. Spread out your ingredients. You will need a half a cup of flour, a cup of sugar, a half a stick of butter. Lay them all out. Take a picture. Put that in your visual aid, and you can talk about it and go through all of the things that you need. You will need a wrench. You will need a oil filter. Whatever it is, lay that out. Then move on to the next step. Use your chronological order and take pictures that people can see what they need. Using color. Color brings things to life, but you want to make sure you're using appropriate color and not too much color. I've seen every color of the rainbow out there on visual aids, on PowerPoints, on Google Slides. But really, you want to stick to making sure the things that are important are bold and maybe in a color. You want to use colors that are visible. Yellow is really hard to see from a distance. It kind of blends in, especially on a white background. So you don't want to use that. You might want to highlight in yellow, but you don't want to use yellow as the color of your font. Black and white and blue are very simple to see. And then when you want something to stand out, make it a different color. It doesn't have to be too much. Again, less is more. As we all know, tables, charts, graphs, for them, a picture is worth 1,000 words. It is so much easier to understand the change in the stock market when you look at the graphs of it going up and down rather than just talking about it. It is so much easier to understand how company growth has grown or decreased, or how COVID numbers have increased or decreased when you look at a graph or a chart, or the percentage of population that has been vaccinated, or whatever aspect you are trying to show. Using charts and graphs are so valuable. Now you have to make sure they're clear. You have to make sure that they're readable, but boy, they do convey a lot of information in a very short amount of time. So if you're going to say 90% of the population changes their oil using synthetic oil, and only 10% of the population changes their oil using non-synthetic or actual oil, that could be shown in a chart. So know that most of the population is using synthetic. Most cars nowadays take synthetic. If you want to express something like that, charts and graphs are the way to show it. People trust them. The statistics, put those in there. What is the percentage of people that are, whatever it is, eating chocolate chip cookies? If 80% of the population thinks that Mrs. Fields cookies are the best cookies in the world, tell us that. Maybe that's one of your sources. I'm going to show you how to make Mrs. Fields chocolate chip cookies, and 80% of the population thinks these are the best cookies in the world. Whatever it is you have to show us something. It makes it more memorable. We watched those speeches this semester, argumentative speeches. We watched the young lady who was advocating for raising the driving age. Well, she only had one visual aid to her speech, but she specifically laid out the number of people that died, the number of drivers, the number of passengers, and then the total amount. 8,888 students die, or people die every year as a result of automobile accidents caused by underage drivers. Well, this was a huge idea. The numbers, when you're talking about numbers, you have to use some visual component, because we don't remember, we don't think in those terms. We remember in visuals. So use a visual aid and it will drive home that number. It will make it memorable. So please make sure you are using visual components to add value to your speech. I would say for a demonstrative speech, take those pictures, take those videos. If there's a specific way that you need to turn the wrench, Take a short video, upload it onto a PowerPoint, talk through it, show it again, show it a number of times so that people get it. When you are presenting in your professional career, the goal is always understanding. You want your audience to understand. So if you are presenting and demonstrating for something that they need to be able to do right afterwards, you need to craft your speech in a way so that they are going to be capable of doing it. If they are working with you along the way, if they are baking those chocolate chip cookies in their kitchen with you, you have to give them time. You want to make sure that they can do it in the amount of time that you're giving them. With all lectures, demonstrations, really a top time frame is about 15 minutes. So if you have to break your presentation into 15-minute segments to really complete it, if you are putting together a conveyor belt, if you are assembling a swing set, if you break it into 15-minute segments, people will more likely follow it and follow it all the way through. 15 minutes should be your max. If you can make it shorter, all the better. Use a lot of visuals. They will help you along the way. Pictures, graphs, charts, put them all in there. Use fonts appropriately. Do not overwhelm your viewer. All right, I think this is the total for visual aids, but I want to make sure that you completely understand all aspects of using visuals. Lastly, there are a few things you need to consider. You need to make sure that your graphics are working if you are using graphics in your visuals. The last thing you want is it to not come in. I've seen different aspects of speeches come in, and I've seen professors do it. Things fall apart when don't have other people jump into your visual aid, into your video while you're crafting a visual aid. Make sure that your graphics all work. So test everything. You really have to practice with visual aids. It's not just craft them and then go let it fly. You really do have to practice and rehearse more with them. So visual aids actually do help you rehearse. Visual aids will help you explain complex ideas, break them into chunks, use the visuals. They'll help you to show how something works, but please be prepared. There's always room for the technology that you're using to fail. So if you are relying completely on some piece of technology, especially when it's a live performance and that technology fails, you have to be able to go on without it. Now, if you're recording something, you just fix the technology. But if it's a live performance, be prepared for the technology to fail and be able to speak without your visual aid. It will be much harder, but be prepared just in case. We have all been at places. I was in the middle of a job interview and the technology failed and I had no notes and I had no visual component and I was putting on a lecture and they were going to hire me or not hire me. I didn't get the job. I don't think it was because of my visual aid failing, but be ready for that. Have backup notes, have backup ways to present, have backup ways to explain different pieces of your presentation. And you always need to practice more. Don't craft your visual aid and think that it's going to stand all by itself. You have to practice and rehearse with it multiple times. And with all speeches, the more you practice, the better off you're going to be. All right, thank you.